Warning: the content you are about to see is not suitable for all ages. Viewer discretion is advised.
Rainbow Factory. Written by Aurora Dawn. Read by Valerium E. Enjoy.
Now a rainbow's tale isn't quite as nice as the story we knew of sugar and spice.
There's long been rumors as to how exactly rainbows are made in Equestria. While a great amount of Pegasi are employed in the rainbow department of the Cloudsdale Weather Corporation, almost all of them do the lower factory work. What is known as the great streams of spectra, the individual colors of the rainbow, flow out through large grates down into vast vats. From there, workers carefully mix the spectra into the coagulated rainbow pools that dot and run throughout the factory and surrounding city. Next, that mixture is pumped to the floor below, where other employees atomize it and store it until the active weather Pegasi deploy it into the field. However, no one knows how the individual spectra are made. Supplies are never seen being brought in, leaving no clue as to what goes into a rainbow. Tourists visiting the facility are treated to a featureless and foreboding wall with massive reinforced doors barring entry to any pony at all times. While most of the facility's various signs and architecture is bubbly and welcoming, the Rainbow Factory's upper floors is protected by harsh imagery of potential hazards and death. And the cloud wall is made not out of the clean white of the rest of the city, but out of a black, quite thundering fog. To become an employee of the Upper Rainbow Factory means sacrificing any life outside those ominous walls. Workers are sworn to secrecy, forbidden from living inside the facility itself. Those few who ever managed to make it out, not in a body bag, were twisted and disturbed, too damaged to even bring themselves to talk about it. Many theories are proposed: dark magic from captured unicorns, chemicals and environmental hazards that no sane pony could tolerate, and even thoughts of another unknown sister of Celestia's, destined to create spectra instead of controlling some celestial body. None of them could be further from the truth.
But a rainbow's easy when you get to know it with the help of the magic of the Pegasus device.
Come on, Orion! We're going to be late for our final test! Scootaloo called to a friend of hers. She was older now, in her last year of flight school. She, like all other Pegasi in the school, was terribly nervous for the final test. Those that passed were granted freedom into the world to find their cutie marks, if they hadn't yet, and become working ponies. A little known, or at least little thought about fact, was that what happened to the fools that failed their test? While uncommon, one or two from every class generally didn't have it in them to perform the rigorous acts and maneuvers. Those that failed their tests were looked down upon in the worst of ways. Shunned and hated, Cloudsdale had always bred a form of nationalism amongst its occupants. If you weren't the best, or didn't show the potential of being the greatest, you weren't allowed to be a part of the flock, the glorious collective that Cloudsdalians referred to themselves as. Scootaloo moved a little to the side as Orion, a tall yet fairly skinny pony, settled next to her. He fluffed his light brown feathers and gave a worried attempt at a smile as he scanned his surroundings. They were sitting with all of the other graduating Pegasi in a large and open waiting room overlooking the Colosseum. Just visible in the distance was the Rainbow Factory, and Orion glanced at it and gulped. "What's the matter, Orion? You're afraid of getting a dead-end job on the snow line?" Orion chuckled a bit, then closed his eyes and sighed. "No, it's just, I don't know. I don't think I can do this. What if I fail? What if I don't fail, but do just bad enough to still be disliked by everyone? I don't know if I can take being deported. Where do we even go, anyways?" Scootaloo gave Orion a friendly punch. "No one knows, you dolt. And we're not going to fail. Everyone here is going to be fine. I know I'm gonna pass." She laughed. "Thanks to the tips from Rainbow Dash, I'm sure I'll be fine."
Oh yeah,
Sure, that reassures me. That's actually just as, if not even more reassuring than the psychopathic hate every pony here seems to love to spread. Quit panicking, Scaredy Wings, Scootaloo teased. The only one here I think that might fail is that yellow pony with the dark green mane. She's the one who was out sick for a month, you know. Oh, yeah. Orion remembered. As he craned his head in the other pony's direction, that one had that bad case of hoof and wing. She looks pretty confident, though. I suppose we'll see. Scootaloo trailed, turning to look at the factory herself. It gave her chills. Not chills of fear, but of pride. I hope I get some cool active weather job. Can you imagine? Everyone in Ponyville, or Philadelphia, staring up at me going, "There goes Scootaloo, such an amazing flyer. She's just as cool as Rainbow Dash." She smiles in excitement, forgetting her tension for a moment. That would be something. I'll admit, mind you, you coming from Cloudsdale, who wouldn't be in awe? Exactly. Praise the flock. Praise the flock, Orion replied reluctantly. Places, places, every pony. A massive, muscle-bound Pegasus walked towards the entrance to the Colosseum. We're going to do this by name. Your adjectors are on the east side of the field. Do not, I repeat, do not fly too far west. If they lose sight of you for any reason, you'll be failed immediately. Taking deep breaths, stretch your wings one last time. The test will consist of 3 sections: weather clearing, agility, and finally, recovery. Clear the clouds, fly through the hoop, and then fly to the marked elevation. Close your wings for at least 3 seconds, any less and you'll fail. But keep in mind, there's no extra points for extra seconds. Finally, recover before you hit the cloud floor. Understood? Any questions? The instructor paused and carefully glanced at every pony in the room. Everyone's eyes were completely focused on him, and none were creased with confusion. All right, Aurora Dawn, you're up first. Clear, fly, fall, complete. The yellow pony nodded and trotted up to the starting ramp with purpose. She stared at the watching judges, waiting for all 3 of them to nod. She took off with a powerful force, bouncing the ramp as she did so. Every pony watched Aurora quickly reach the starting altitude, and then began a direct and purposeful attack on the pre-positioned clouds. With expert timing and intelligent turnarounds, the sky was soon empty of any moisture. Scootaloo and Orion watched with open mouths as she pulled fast and tight turns, expertly shooting through each and every hoop. Finally, Aurora pulled herself up to the proper altitude, hovered, and closed her wings. The group of students gasped as she started plummeting down towards the clouds, and together they counted breathlessly. 1, 2, 3. They sighed as they watched her wings open in the correct amount of time, collectively holding that relief. Suddenly, Aurora's wings whipped upwards, and the onlookers flinched in horror as they all heard the loud, hollow snap that was suddenly replaced by an unending, piercing scream. Many, like Orion, shielded their eyes with their wings, as others, like Scootaloo, could only watch terrified as the blur of yellow, green, and red plummeted into the cloud with a dull thump. Wasting no time, the instructor walked forward again as the 3 judges simply pointed down and started shuffling papers around. Speaking loudly as if nothing had happened, he called out again, "Daisy Fields, clear, fly, fall, complete." Scootaloo and Orion stared slack-jawed as another pony gulped, then walked forward onto the path and took off. The 2 turned back to the tuft on the clouds where Aurora landed and stared. As the wind blew the fragments that were thrown up from the collision away, they saw a shivering, yellow body attempt to move, only to collapse with a cry. "Faraday spot. Clear, fly, fall, complete." Aurora still struggled to walk, wailing with every step. Her legs weren't broken. She could use them fine, but it was obvious the pain from her wing joint and the loss of her future was crushing her. Scootaloo felt Orion shuffle uneasily, tears welling in his eyes as a frown formed on his face. "Holiday shine. Clear, fly, fall, complete." No one is coming to help her. Orion seethed through his closed teeth. Scootaloo felt extremely sad for the yellow Pegasus, but couldn't see herself helping her. She would be failed herself and be sent far, far away from Cloudsdale and any familiar place in Equestria, to a place where she and other failed students could never stain Cloudsdale's reputation. It was a terrible shame, but Scootaloo couldn't fail herself. She couldn't fail her friends, and she definitely couldn't fail Rainbow Dash. Not after the care and help she had given her for most of her life. Scootaloo blinked back the tears from her eyes and forced herself to watch the competing students. One after another, they took off, successfully passing the test, and flew to the east gate under the judges' spots in the stand. That's all Scootaloo focused on. Pass the test, fly to the gate, live a happy life. Orion Solstice. Clear, fly, fall, complete.
No.
What? The instructor took a step back, his front leg left raised in the air. You can't just refuse your flight test. Get that out there before you piss the judges off and ruin your life. No. Don't even pretend you care about my future, if you don't care about hers. Orion defied, unsure of himself. You say you want me to get a good life, and yet you let those that fail suffer unbearable pain. Get that flock onto the field before I fail you myself, the instructor shouted menacingly. Fine, Orion snapped. Before walking onto the ramp, he stared at the judges, waiting for the individual nods, and the second they came, he took off. However, long before the starting altitude, he turned sharply and landed gently next to Aurora. She looked up at him, blood running down her forehead and sides, and tears streaming down her face. While she spoke, What are you doing? You'll be failed like me. You'll get exiled. I'd rather be exiled from a place that treats ponies like this than live my life while others don't live theirs. Aurora smiled. Happiness briefly replaced the sadness in her blackened, puffy eyes, until she stumbled again, and intense pain rippling across her body. Orion leaned in close, using his wings to brace the yellow pony against himself. He glared at the judges, projecting his hatred at them. They stared down, unaffected, and simply pointed down before looking back towards the ramp for the next contestant. Scootaloo stood shocked, hardly hearing her name being called. She moved numbly up to the ramp, never taking her eyes off of her friend and the pony he sacrificed himself to help. After a brief moment, she shook her head, recovered her thoughts, and looked to the judges, thoughts racing through her head as she watched them all nod. Oh, Celestia, what do I do? I can't let every pony I know down, but I'll never see Orion again. I hope he knew that risk when he did that. I'm sure he's thinking the same right now. She glanced at Orion. He wasn't looking at her. She took off, heartbroken, instincts kicking in as the familiar rush of wind cooled her and blew her thoughts away. She stopped at the right altitude and then launched again, sensing and seeing every cloud, formulating a game plan on the fly. In a matter of a couple dozen seconds, the sky was clear. She did a quick loop in mid-flight, aiming at the first hoop. With a powerful beat of her wings, she propelled forward through the first ring, and then the second, and then the third, expertly turning and drifting with each one. She curved in towards the second-to-last ring, near the bottom of the field. As she descended, she caught sight of Orion and Aurora, who were almost at the west gate now. Orion turned his head and smiled weakly. Scootaloo's focus shattered. Orion knew what he did. He cared about her, he'd miss her, and he'd never get to say goodbye. Scootaloo cranked into the bottom part of the ring, falling backwards several feet and hitting the ground. With a sudden, intense flash of fear, she flipped herself onto her hooves and began flapping her wings, levitating off the ground. Maybe that didn't count as a failure, she thought. I can still fly. There was a distraction on the field. She spun around to the judges. 3 hooves pointed down. Scootaloo started crying, tears welling up and blurring her vision. This wasn't right. This shouldn't have happened. None of it. Orion should have passed his test and cheered her on from the east gate. She shouldn't have looked at him. She should have focused on flying. But there was no room for excuses. Defeated, she slowly hovered towards Orion and settled down next to him. She looked at him through her purple eyes. He looked back, offering a smile. You did a good job. Scootaloo dropped her head and sobbed. She then walked around Orion, lifting a wing of her own, and helped Aurora walk to the west gate. Before them stood a long, unlit hall with only a cheap sign stuck to the wall, notifying test failees to proceed down the hall. They waited only briefly to gather themselves and prepare for where they would be taken, and then all stepped forward together.
Let's delve deeper into rainbow philosophy, far beyond than that of Cloudsdale's mythology. It's easy to misjudge that floating city, with its alluring decor and social psychology.
Against an empty carriage at the end of the lonely hall was 3 imposing ponies, leaning in disinterest and bored poses. One of them happened to glance up as the sorry-looking trio stumbled out into the open. They were on the bottom edge of the Colosseum, with the vast rolling hills and plains of Equestria visibly far below. "Hey, boss, we got some of dem worthless Pegasuses," the first one called to an even bigger pony on the other side of the carriage. "I suppose it's get-to-work time, isn't it? Cool it, hotshot. There may be more, too." No, I was the last to go." Scootaloo spoke in sobs. Orion could only hang his head. It's... She paused, and then breathed deeply, determined to remain as strong as she could. It's just us. Aurora's wings, they're broken. She needs help." "Ain't that just a crying shame?" "It is. What is it to us? All dat better she doesn't come flying back to us no more." "We may have failed our damn test, but that doesn't mean we're not worth keeping alive," Scootaloo shouted in a flash of rage. She was determined to hold on to as much dignity as she could. All right, sheesh. Hey, Patches, doctor her up before we head out. I don't want any blood on dem seats. Anyways, I just washed that thing. You other two, in the cart." Orion and Scootaloo hopped into the carriage and got as comfortable as they could on the hard seats, but made sure to leave room for Aurora. As soon as the third of the large ponies finished managing her wings, Aurora carefully stepped onto the vehicle and lay down on the bench at the back. Scootaloo inched closer to her and leaned down to talk as the door to the carriage slammed shut. The boss pony was inside the back, standing by the door, watching each of them. "So," Scootaloo began quietly, trying not to speak too loud, "you're Aurora." "I'm Scootaloo. I'm sorry we had to meet like this." "Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting." Aurora spoke gently, with serenity in her eyes. "We did our best. That's all we can say. That's all any of us can say. Who's to say that the city of the deported isn't a good one anyways?" The thought struck Scootaloo as she considered it. No one was ever told about where the Pegasi were brought. Most ponies considered it to be some odd land, like where the zebras hailed from. What made Scootaloo realize something even more profound. "Hey, if where we're taken is where Zikora's from, then there's got to be a way to get back. It's not as if we're banned from Equestria. Fluttershy, a former friend of Rainbow Dash's, she's a Pegasus who lives in Ponyville. Rainbow Dash told me we couldn't speak to her because she never passed her flight school. She never took her test, but they've never come and taken her away." "Exactly," Aurora agreed, nodding. Orion overheard and offered his thoughts. "I think the reason we're sent far away is because no pony from Cloudsdale ever wants to admit that someone who failed the flight school could come from their city. What a fucking horrible place, now that I think about it. I never want to go back." "Maybe that's why no Pegasuses ever came back. They just don't like Cloudsdale." "You goddamn worthless ponies can hardly call yourself Pegasi," Boss spoke from the door. He was swaying ever so slightly as the carriage was lifted and began moving to an unknown location. "Useless failures is what you are. No pony comes back from exile, regardless of reason. Can't even pass your flucking test. You 3 make me sick." Scootaloo jumped up from her seat, lifting herself into the air with her wings, and drove legs first at Boss. You shut the Tartarus up about us. You have no right to treat us like this. Boss raised a hoof and backhanded Scootaloo out of the air onto the floor. I can treat you however I want. You hardly classify as ponies to Cloudsdale, or any of Equestria for that matter. Now sit the fuck down and shut up until you get to your destination. Where are we being taken, anyways? Not like we can tell anyone now, and I'm sure as the deliverers you guys should know. Orion cautiously reasoned. Damned if I know. We handle this carriage off to ponies in suits, and we get a bag full of bits to keep quiet about the whole thing. It's how it always been for 1,000 years. The three foals huddled together again, scared off their unknown fate. They kept quiet as they waded through the unbearable trip, all lost in their own thoughts. Friends, family, loved ones, and pets, all would never see them again, and some would never find out why. An hour passed, and then another. Finally, the uncomfortable quiet was broken by a sudden lurch as the carriage stopped in its flight. Ah, Boss smiled. There's my stop. You ponies play nice now. Have fun wherever the Tartarus you're sent. The carriage door shuffled open, and Boss hopped out with a gust of cold wind. It was night now, with hardly any light to see with at all. Scootaloo stared outside and noticed another figure staring in. It was dressed in a shadowy suit, its tail dyed an unnatural black. Its face was covered by a dark, loose-fitting mask, concealing its mane. All that were visible were rosy-colored eyes, staring empty at the three ponies. They stopped on Scootaloo, momentarily, indifferent, but she stared back. A second passed, the dark pony slammed the door shut, and the carriage took off once again. At least we can talk now, Aurora whispered in the dark. But they had nothing to talk about.
But with all great things comes a great responsibility, that of Clownsdale's being weather stability.
The carriage finally shuddered to a stop. The three desolate foals blinked their eyes awake, all of them having resolved to conserve their energy for whatever came next. With a loud scraping noise, the door shook and then swung wide open. Several more ponies, obscured by those same masks and suits, moved around the area. Scootaloo blinked against the light from what she was seeing. They were in a cloud building, and as her eyes adjusted, she noticed more details. Several of the cloaked ponies were rushing around, some holding clipboards, some carrying briefcases, and others important-looking items on their backs. The complex was full of machinery and signs. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and a loud, constant hum ran in the background, occasionally joined with other industrial sounds such as a crash and alarms. Scootaloo gasped. This place, the architecture, it's all so familiar. I think we're in the weather factory? Orion frowned. That can't be right. We were traveling for way too long. We've got to be far away from Equestria now, not to mention the city. Actually, Scootaloo may be right, Aurora mused. I noticed it was maybe the same amount of travel time from where the carriage driver swapped to here that it was from the Coliseum to there, but I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe that's just coincidence. Welcome, mules, a large and powerful voice commanded. Several of the suited ponies moved to make way for a deep, dark red Pegasus dressed in a lab coat. You degenerates are probably wondering where you are exactly. Stupid fools. You're in Cloudsdale, the Rainbow Factory, to be correct. Allow me to show you around. What's going on here? Do you expect us to use us as slaves? Because I'd rather be deported, thanks. Scootaloo yelled. Orion and Aurora got off their seats and stood behind Scootaloo, nodding in agreement. Like you failures have a choice. You'll be here for the rest of your lives. Oh, I'm sorry. Where are my manners? I am Dr. Atmosphere. My degree isn't a medical one, I assure you, in case you're picturing some dreadful surgery going on behind the scenes. Strange how so many worthless Pegasi get that idea. No, my degree is in engineering. I am one of the directors of the corporation. I am sure you've all had the tour of the lower facility, no? The three ponies nodded slowly, unsure of what was going on. Excellent! Who can tell me where the tour begins? Orion spoke up first. Where the spectra comes from, upstairs, and is mixed. Very good. What a pity you're utterly useless to the flock. You could have been a smart addition. Dr. Atmosphere smiled sadistically and patted Orion on the head. But today, we're on the upper floor. Please follow me, and don't get too far behind, or one of my many helpers will be forced to encourage you. With that, he winked at the suited ponies. Nodding, three of them at the rear leaned forward and jabbed each of the young Pegasi with liquid thunder-tipped rods, shocking them to the ground. Dr. Atmosphere whinnied in a laughter as they all yelped and fell, continuing into a soft chuckle as they all stood up again. Scootaloo blinked tears from her eyes and shook herself, trying to lose the tingling numbness in her nerves. She turned and quickly looked at each of the masked ponies, catching each of them in the eyes when she could. None of them were the rose-eyed pony from the carriage. Begrudgingly, she started walking behind the red engineer. You must simply be careful in this factory, Dr. Atmosphere began in a tone not unlike the many tour guides in the lower floors. There's plenty of nooks and crannies and vents and vats one could fall into. One must be careful not to hurt themselves. After all, you're already hopeless as it is, any more so, and even we couldn't use you. He glanced behind himself maliciously as the three fools frowned, insulted by his words. They were walking down a hallway with vibrating machines and assembly lines lining the way, occasionally ducking under low-hanging wires or carefully stepping over steaming pipes. As they walked through the building, became cooler and cooler, all three were scrutinizing, studying, desperately looking for a way out. They couldn't see any. Now let me tell you a story. Cloudsdale is where the weather is made. Without us, the rest of Equestria would starve, freeze, drown, and generally be a not very happy place. That gives us a special honor, one that can't be tainted by, incompetent fools like you. How could Equestria look up to us and trust us if Pegasi like you are flying around wearing the Cloudsdale name? No, no. We need to do something with all of you, and then we got a delicious idea. One day, over 1,000 years ago. Those were some smart ponies back then, I'll say. You don't find too many of them these days, but I digress. Here now, through these doors, quickly now, before more encouragement is supplied. Dr. Atmosphere opened a gray, heavy-looking door in the wide corridor and offered a hoof inside. Scootaloo stared up at him. He glanced at a suited pony. Scootaloo and the others walked inside, and he laughed again. Enjoy the rest of your pitiful lives. And with that, he slammed the door closed. They all turned and looked at the big room they had been led into. It was fairly open and empty, almost like a theater room. At one end of the room there was a peculiar-looking machine. It was large and cubic, and almost featureless, save for 8 clear glass tubes that jutted out from the side like spidered legs. At the top of the box was a single, massive hopper, red with rust despite the rest of the machine appearing shiny and clean. Even further above, there was a system of chains and gears that hung loosely off the ledge of the scaffolding. Down on the floor, a small collection of defeated, crying ponies sat, idly chatting. Those uniforms they're wearing, those are from the other flight schools across town, Aurora informed, sounding shocked. And those other ponies sitting over there, see? I remember a trip we went on once with Levitating Acres Private School. I remember them from that trip. So, this is where all the failures go? Not deported, but forced to work forever? Orion whined. In exchange for helping someone, he had doomed himself and his friend to a life of servitude. Scootaloo reached a reassuring wing over and lifted his chin with it. She smiled at him, sympathetic. At least we don't have to go through this alone, she reassured. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the group of test failures. One pony from an unidentified school took off, heading towards one of the doors on the scaffolding. Immediately, two workers launched at record speed, and both clipped the flyaway with their tasers. The foal spasmed in the air and then dropped like a stone. He landed with an audible crack and broke into a violent burst of twitching, and all the other ponies jumped back, staring horrified at their friend. They watched, hopeful, for a long time. He didn't move. Some cried softly, but most others turned away, far too shocked to feel anything. I guess that option's out, Aurora quietly said to no one in particular. But you can't fly right now anyways, Aurora questioned. That medic guy, Patches, or whatever he was called, he popped my wings back into their joints and bandaged up where my skin tore. I won't be winning any races, but I think I can fly again. They shuffled forward and joined the group of ponies, looking at each other with understanding sorrow. Eyes front and center, you inept mules, one of the workers shouted. After the previous display, no one challenged that order, and they stared at the scaffolding just as one of the doors opened.
How, you ask, are they up to the task? To which the answer is in the simple facility.
A few official-looking Pegasi walked in on the scaffolding and turned to look down on the group with disgust. Dr. Atmosphere stood onto a small podium set up in the center and began to speak loudly and clearly. By now, you've all clearly determined that you are not going into exile. There is no deportation. There never was. You are in the factory. You will never leave the factory, and while you may be called useless, that's also not entirely true. You're worthless to the flock as a pony, but you still have a purpose. Purpose to all the ponies in this land, far and wide. You get to help us make rainbows. Beautiful, magical rainbows. Doesn't that sound exciting to you? He grinned ecstatically, taking in all of the disgusted looks from every foal on the floor below him. I thought so. He chuckled. It is just such an honor, you know, to leave every pony entrusted with the task speechless, too. Now, do we have any volunteers? Again, every pony below glared with hatred. One brave foal, a light pink one, from Levitating Acres, walked forward a few steps and yelled, "How could you ever get away with this? How could Celestia or even Luna know about this and tolerate it? It's slavery. It's torture." I think you'll find it's more than that. A second official pony walked out of the shadows and up to the podium. They were still obscured by a suit and mask, but Scootaloo noticed that it was the same rose-eyed pony from before. Dr. Atmosphere walked off the podium and allowed the second to talk, and Scootaloo watched more intently now. The voice was familiar, and she focused, trying to place it. 1,000 years ago, when Celestia banished Luna from Equestria and sent her to the moon, she was charged with 3 tasks. She originally was in charge of raising the sun and showering the land with rainbows, but with the moon being an additional task, she had to hand down the responsibility of rainbows. Celestia entrusted the Pegasus of Cloudsdale to make the rainbows for her from then on. For the first dozen years, we were given powerful unicorns to help create spectra. Spectra is a pure pigment, pure color. Everything is full of spectra, but you can't just harvest it. You can never separate color from an object, so it was made artificially with magic. The masked pony never took her eyes off the brave pink pony. That is, until our top engineers made a breakthrough. They discovered an ingenious way to extract pigment, and it was so beautiful, even a simple machine could do it. But it couldn't be done with just anything. The conditions had to be right. I don't care how justified this is. This is wrong. The pink Pegasus screamed, growing angrier by the minute. The mysterious pony whipped off her mask, unveiling more than her rose eyes. Her skin was a light cyan, and her mane was gorgeous rainbow. Several of the fillies gasped. Scootaloo's knees weakened as it hit her. It was Rainbow Dash. Scootaloo's thoughts raced through her mind, and the room started to spin. It couldn't be. An evil twin, maybe? Perhaps some neglected sister? Rainbow Dash couldn't be this evil. She was her friend, her mentor, her only family, even if not by blood. How? How? How was all she could think. It had to be living ponies. Only in ponies, where magic and spectra ran freely together, Rainbow Dash threw her head back and laughed maniacally. Only then could the spectra be separated, and it was such a beautiful idea. Such a wonderful, horrible idea. It works so well. We could create exponentially more rainbows, of better quality with real spectra. And it finally gave us a way to prevent Cloudsdale from being tainted by all those horrible Pegasuses that couldn't even fly. Scootaloo couldn't take it. While all the other ponies were exclaiming their disgust and fear, running and screaming from where they came in, backing off as workers surrounded them and herded them back into the center of the floor, Scootaloo couldn't take it anymore. I thought you loved me, she wailed, cutting Rainbow Dash's laugh short. Uh-huh. Rainbow Dash turned, spotting the amber-orange Pegasus as she wailed, I thought you loved me. How could you do this to me? I thought you cared for me. After all the help, all my life, you treated me like a little sister. And I treated you like a big sister. You were my big sister to me. You were the only family I ever had, and you knew it. Tears were pouring down her face now, obscuring her vision. Her throat hurt from the crying and shouting, but she couldn't stop. After everything, you were just going to let me die? I tried so hard for you. She stared at the floor for a moment. Everyone was silent. Then Scootaloo looked up slowly, and while she couldn't see for the tears in her eyes, she looked straight at Rainbow Dash, straight into those rosy eyes, past them, and deep into Rainbow Dash herself. I thought you loved me. Rainbow Dash returned the look, her eyes revealing no emotion, no love, no care, only apathy. Slowly, however, they glared at Scootaloo. Pure, seething hatred erupted from Rainbow Dash's mouth as she screamed in return. I did love you. I tried so hard for you. I taught you everything I knew in hopes you could pass your test. You had it in you, kid. I knew what they did here. Ever since I worked my way up here, got promoted to director, all thanks to your urging. I learned a lot about this place. Why do you think I pushed you so hard to train? Got so mad when you skipped practice. How do you? She trailed off, shaking her head, remembering her anger suddenly. I tried all right. It was up to you to save yourself. You didn't just fail yourself. You didn't just fail Cloudsdale. You failed me. You failed me, and that's the worst thing you could have done. You aren't just dead to Cloudsdale, you're dead to me. The room tilted as Scootaloo tried to comprehend what she was told. Her mind broke, unable to focus on anything. She stumbled slightly until Orion held open a wing, and she clung to it for stability. Rainbow Dash noticed this and pointed and yelled with more fury. You can't have happiness. You ruined me. Now I'll ruin you. Workers, the brown one, there, him first. No! Scootaloo, Aurora, and Orion all jumped. Suited ponies cornered Orion, pushing the other two to the side. He tried to leap out of the way, to run, but one of the stallions spun around and kicked at him, the hoof connecting to his shoulder, and Orion collapsed with a shout. Get back! More workers yelled at Aurora and Scootaloo as they dragged the whimpering Orion to the front of the room. The giant machine at the back started to hum to life, and the assembly of chains lifted off the top and moved towards the floor. As they dropped it, became clear that they weren't chains, but shackles, and the workers clasped Orion into them. Braving a look up, he turned to Scootaloo. Don't worry, Scootaloo. I love you. Goodbye. Goodbye, Orion. Scootaloo gasped. I love you too. With that, the chains pulled tightly and lifted the brown Pegasus all the way up to the gears. The chains grew taut and stretched each of Orion's limbs straight up and down. We find the machine works better if the limbs are broken, Rainbow Dash explained apathetically as the chains spun around in opposite directions, twisting Orion. His screams almost covered the echoing pops and shattering noises. One or two jagged bones tore through his sides, and his yells faded to a slow, quiet rattling of breath. The chains untwisted, and then the shackles opened, dropping the pony into the single opening. With horror, Scootaloo watched, her brain overcome with what was happening, detached itself from all emotions. She noticed that at the top of the machine wasn't rusty. It was blood. Blood just like what was being tossed up from the mangled remains of Orion as the rest of his body was swallowed into the great machine. Alternating rows of scythe-like blades drug him down until only one lone hoof, directly straight up, could be seen, and then there was no more. All the tubes of green and red spectra started spewing their brilliant colors. Her vision started to fade, and the last thing she noticed was Aurora's concerned, broken voice saying Scootaloo's name as she flopped to her side.
In the Rainbow Factory, where all your fears and horrors come true. In the Rainbow Factory, where not a single soul gets through.
Scootaloo, get up! Get up now! Hurry, Scootaloo! Wake up! Wake up! Scootaloo shook her head, briefly wondering where she was and what was happening. In a flash, it all came back, and she jumped to her hoofs. Aurora was shaking her, fright encasing her face. The workers were starting to approach, the two now, tasers and shackles up and ready. Scootaloo, they're coming for us. What do we do? Scootaloo looked for an opening. All the doors were blocked except for one, up on the scaffolding next to the directors. The suited ponies were slowly approaching, not rushing as they delighted in the fool's terror. Fear was their tool. Scootaloo spun around, looking for an exit. There was only the one, she realized. I have a plan, she whispered to Aurora. What's that? Clear, fly, fall, complete. Aurora's eyes widened after a moment, and she nodded, understanding. She repeated louder now, so the other frightened fillies could hear. Clear, fly, fall, complete. Got it. 1. Scootaloo started counting. 2. Aurora squeaked as she backed into Scootaloo. The workers were mere feet away now. 3! A collective shout reverberated around the room as every filly that could actually fly took off. The suited ponies gasped and fell back, unsure where to go. There was too much confusion. A few of the faster-thinking ones took off as well, tasers at the ready, aiming at the closest Pegasus they could take. Step 1, Scootaloo screamed. Clear! With her command, the failures started targeting the dark ponies in droves. Hooves connected with heads, and with some of the students fell lifeless to the floor. The majority of the casualties were the suited ponies. Scootaloo and Aurora landed on the scaffolding, right by the door, and reached to open it. It was locked. Oh, Celestia, what do we do now? Aurora cried. We're still on clear, Scootaloo shouted, turning around and bucking the door. Aurora followed her lead, focusing the brunt of her blows on the part of the wall where the latch would be. Rainbow Dash, on the other side of the scaffolding, recovered from her initial shock of the rebellion and noticed Scootaloo pounding on the door. Kill her! She screamed at the other important-looking ponies. Kill her! She started to gallop towards the fillies, forgetting her wings in the moment. Scootaloo closed her eyes, pounding harder and harder on the door. It started to creak and bend. Any second now, she thought. Rainbow Dash will get here. It's over. I'm doomed. She would have cried had she had any tears left. The door started to split from its frame, now leaning inward. It wouldn't be long until it was open. Scootaloo realized Dash still hadn't reached her, and she opened her clenched eyes, peeking up at the scaffolding. All the remaining ponies were there, pressed together, holding the enraged blue Pegasus and her cronies back. They wouldn't last long, however. Even as Scootaloo watched, twitching and yelping foals were falling to the floor below, some even landing in the great maw of the Pegasus device. The pink pony from Levitating Acres was there, and she turned to Scootaloo and Aurora just as the door flew open into the hall behind. Fly, the pink pony demanded with a pain in her voice. She opened her mouth to speak again, but was cut short as the pile of Pegasus blew apart. With Rainbow Dash standing enraged in the opening, she was on her two back hooves, her front two rolling in the air, a small gash down her side leaking red, and her multicolored mane was torn in a patch. An unearthly howl passed her lips, and her rose eyes were drained of any sanity that was left. Come on, Aurora, Scootaloo pleaded as she spun around. We've got to fly if we're going to live. I can't. This is too much. I haven't healed. Flying up here hurt too much. Aurora looked at Scootaloo with wide-open eyes. You go, Scootaloo. Tell everyone what happened here. Let them know. She glanced back at the wall of students, almost bare now as Rainbow Dash's bloodlust tore them to pieces. Dash's blue coat was now glistening crimson, almost dripping as she ignored the need for live ponies. There would be more. Cloudsdale could take a small shortage of rainbows. In another few months, there would be more classes, more failure. But for now, all she knew was that Scootaloo had to die, violently, if possible. Decades of working for the Rainbow Factory had fractured her. Being a director, she was one of the only ones allowed out in the public, and keeping the horrible secret with her had only led to psychological problems that no amount of therapy could cure. Scootaloo was her last link to sanity, and her failure had deleted that. There was no logic in her mind anymore, no care, no capacity for compassion, only hate, pure, concentrated, evil hatred filled the gap her love for Scootaloo had once occupied. Rainbow Dash was no more, only this monster remained. I hardly knew you, Aurora, Scootaloo said softly to the yellow Pegasus beside her. I'm sorry I never knew you until all this. I'm sorry we had to meet like this, and I'm sorry we had to part like this. She sniffled. She had found more tears. Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting, Aurora reassured Scootaloo. Now, you heard the other ponies. Fly, Scootaloo. Fly. Goodbye. Goodbye, Aurora. With that, Scootaloo hovered and spun around, glancing back into the yellow pony's eyes one last time, and launched down the cramped corridor. She had no idea where she was going, but any chance at freedom was one she had to take. Aurora blinked a couple of times, standing in front of the door. Rainbow Dash would have at least one obstacle in her way to Scootaloo. Blue Pony tossed the last of the other students over the scaffolding and slowly walked towards Aurora. How cute. You think that you, a useless, broken pile of manure, could possibly stand in my way? You really make me laugh. None of you can compete with just how awesome I am. Love can overcome all evil in this world. Aurora stood tall in rebellion as Rainbow Dash stopped in front of her. Aurora stayed in front of Dash, barring her entry to the corridor beyond. Well then, Pitch, let's see if love will overcome this one. And with that, Rainbow Dash grabbed one of Aurora's bandaged wings and yanked, tearing it off of her completely. Aurora collapsed onto her knees, grinding her teeth in horrible pain, but she didn't scream. She wouldn't give in to Rainbow Dash. Rainbow grabbed her other wing and dragged the kicking and moaning foal down to the center of the scaffolding. She lifted Aurora up by the wing, laughing quietly to herself as the look of the intense agony appeared on Aurora's face. Rainbow Dash took to the air, bringing the squirming yellow and green pony with her over the top of the device. With a squeak of evil laughter, she jerked the wing in her hoof. It too disconnected from the now convulsing Pegasus, and Aurora fell, landing head first in the rows of alternating blades. The door on the scaffolding swung with a gust of wind, just as the machine began pumping out the brightest greens and yellows it had ever produced, but there was no one around to see it. Scootaloo glanced backwards momentarily, her heart pounding. The noise of the constant thump, thump, thump drowned out any other sound in her head, and her ears throbbed along with it. The corridor was just like the one that led to the theater room, cramped, with dozens of obstacles jutting out at random intervals. Straight behind her, the bloody mare that used to be Rainbow Dash was cruising along the scaffolding. Both Pegasi were completely straight, hooves forward, wings beating at an impossible count. One trying to escape, the other to capture. Scootaloo looked forward again, focusing on what lay ahead of her. That's all that matters, she thought. What's ahead of me? There's no changing what's behind me. Ignore it. Focus. For the second time in as many days, a flood of instincts overtook Scootaloo, and despite the terror she felt in her body, the sorrow that surrounded her, and the evil behind her, her worries melted away, and the thought of flying encased her very being. Down under the wires and pipes she ducked, up and around various workers, whose complaints and shouts were ignored, only to be repeated momentarily as a raging pony behind collided with them. Her body doing the flying, Scootaloo's thoughts turned to escape opportunities. She whipped around sharp corners at impossible speeds, zipped up and down countless sets of stairs, trying to shake her murderous tail to no avail. She contemplated every nook and cranny she passed, and briefly considered hiding if she could get enough distance. She struck the idea down. As insane as Rainbow Dash may be, she was still too smart to overlook any possible spots Scootaloo may have hidden in. But there, ahead of her, Scootaloo thought she found a solution, a garbage vent of some kind, stuck out from the wall, leading seemingly down to the floor below. For the briefest of moments, she gave thought to where it may go, whether out of the factory or into some incinerator. She couldn't tell. But it was probably worth the risk. She snuck one last glance behind her to make sure the unstable mare was far enough away. Rainbow Dash paid no attention to any hazard as she sought her prey, tearing through electrical wires and ricocheting off heated pipes, going through any obstacle rather than around it to save time. Thankfully, the collisions had slowed her down enough to give Scootaloo a chance. She slammed to a sudden halt over the open vent, hoping for her life. Fall, she muttered, closing her eyes and her wings, resisting the urge to start flapping immediately. She counted slightly to herself as shadows rushed past her closed eyes, hoping for the best of where this vent led. 1, 2, 3. She opened her eyes and her wings and looked up, hovering. Rainbow Dash was up above, looking down into the vent. Her eyes were buggy and twitched, and she pounded her hooves on the edge of the vent. She was too large to follow, while Scootaloo having barely made it in herself. But then, the anger in her face vanished, only to be replaced by a malicious grin. She started laughing again, the cackling echoing down the vent and reverberating in Scootaloo's mind. "You moron! You never did have a good sense of direction," she teased, laughing again. Scootaloo finally looked down, getting her bearings. "Oh no," she squealed. She was in the theater room again, only by now it was full of workers circling her. Their masked faces seemed to be grinning at her as Rainbow Dash shouted orders down the vent. "Don't let her die! I must do it! Subdue her! Catch her!" She whinnied in glorious victory as the workers shocked Scootaloo with a taser and, as her limp body began to fall from the air, caught her and brought her to the floor. Scootaloo blacked out momentarily as the electricity passed through her, but she came to lying on the cold, cloud floor, metal shackles preventing her from moving. She struggled to get free. She could hardly shake. The chains lifted her slightly, bringing her small body eye to eye with the Pegasus in front of her. The pony was deep blood red, glistening in an artificial light of the factory. Her mane had small spots of gloriously colors of rainbow, but was mostly the same red color as her coat of fur. Chunks of skin were missing from small spots, and her hair was ripped in some places, bald patches of skin in others. The only clue Scootaloo had as to who this was and who it used to be was the rose irises focusing on her. "Any final words, you miserable, worthless horror of a foal?" Scootaloo brought her chin high, still demanding even the tiniest fraction of dignity. "You have beautiful eyes," she cooed softly, yet clearly. That was Rainbow Factory by Aurora Dawn. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a lovely evening. Goodbye.